Hello and welcome to another episode of the Opportunity Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Elfrink, the head of marketing here at Empire Flippers. And today I am speaking with Taylor Smits of MyFBAPrep and Preptopia. So he's one of the co-founders. Him and I have a very in-depth conversation, to be honest, about logistics and supply chain. And I asked him the dreaded question about how can you do forecasting better. But we also get into a bunch of kind of rabbit holes I found really intriguing, from automatic repricing of products to help you prevent stockouts to the absolute explosion that is happening with TikTok Shop and how you can benefit from it as an e-commerce seller today or an Amazon seller, which, like, shame on me, I had no idea that TikTok Shop already integrated with Amazon. I thought it was just Shopify. So if you were like me and living under a rock, say no more, lift that rock off your head and go start selling on TikTok Shop at your Amazon store. But anyways, this is a really cool podcast. I really enjoyed it. I just think you're going to get a ton of value out of it. So I'll stop talking and I will see you on the other side. All right, I got Taylor Smits with me here today, one of the founders of Preptopia and MyFBAPrep. Taylor, welcome to the show, man. You and I have been chatting a little bit now for, I guess, several months now, but my audience may not know you very well. So tell my audience who you are, where you are in the world, and what you do.
Yeah, nice to see you again, Greg. I'm
You
Taylor
too.
Smits. I'm one of three co-founders of MyFBAPrep. Our whole company is remote. So we have, let's say we have partners in Florida and New Jersey. I'm in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. I have another partner in Portugal, and then all of our awesome employees are remote, but in the US. And just a brief overview of our company, what we are. So MyFBAPrep is a network of warehouses. And what that means is we have strategic locations that we work with all over the world, and we process inventory for medium and large e-commerce businesses. So the most common examples of what people are using MyFBAPrep for are, of course, Amazon, FBA or FBM. We have D2C, so fulfillment, pick, pack, ship for website orders, and then B2B, which is just any sort of retail, freight forwarding, or cargo loading. So those are the three most common ways that people use us. And what they get to take advantage of is we have warehouses all over the world, and people can run their supply chain in a way that works for them, which most of the time means saving them money. Yeah, so that's the overview.
I feel like 3PL, logistics, all this stuff is kind of like the unsung hero for e-commerce store owners. Like, everyone wants to know how to do the next best ad, but like this part of the business, I feel, is so fundamental to e-commerce success. I'm happy you're on here so we can really nerd out here on these topics. But before we get too deep into that, talk to me about how you came about starting MyFBAPrep. Like, what is your entrepreneurial journey? How did you get here?
Sure. Well, Bart and I were corporate colleagues in New York City. I was in recruiting and I met him at a company, and he was in ad operations. And ultimately, he connected the two of us with our third partner, who's our CEO, Tom Wicke, that Bart had worked on another client with. So we connected in 2016, and we said that we wanted to do something in e-commerce. And my contribution was I had already been playing around in e-commerce for a number of years. I was doing concert ticket sales for about 8 years, which is, buying tickets at pre-sales with a credit card and then selling them when the prices have shot out. And then I had gotten into drop shipping from AliExpress using Facebook ads. Then I went to Amazon private label. Then I went to Amazon wholesale. So I had sort of been around the block on the Amazon side, and not in a good way. And what ultimately ended up happening is we settled on the idea of launching a warehouse network to sort of mimic this Airbnb model, which I can get into in a second. But we said we want to scratch our own itch. Tom had some experience in the e-commerce world as well. He was doing high SKU like apparel and like on-demand apparel. And so we said, something that was always difficult for us and that we were at the time doing together was the warehousing side of things. And we just decided, like, this is ready for an overhaul. We can do this a lot better.
Excellent. That's funny, on the reseller stuff. I've met a few resellers. It does seem like that is the pathway into all of this, is you just start selling random, reselling random items, right? This is very cool to hear. But man, AliExpress, I haven't heard that in a while. That is like back in the day with, it's still, I guess people still use it. It's just not, I don't hear about it as much as I used to, but Well,
Yeah.
very cool story, man. I want to ask you some, obviously some general questions on logistics, but you already brought up something that, I think we should talk about now, actually, with my FBA prep. So this Airbnb-esque model, I think is one of the more intriguing things you guys do. Like, I think it's an interesting system or model, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
Walk me through that and explain it to my audience because I think it's quite
Sure.
clever.
Do you remember this meme back in the day? Like we're going back like probably 7 years ago now. There was something that was being spread, and it was something to this effect. Facebook is the largest media company in the world, produces no media. Uber is the largest taxi cab company in the world, owns no taxis. Airbnb is the largest hotel chain in the world, owns no hotels. And so this asset light model was intriguing from sort of both the cost and scale potential. Cost meaning how can we keep costs low? Warehouses are notoriously expensive. Just, there's a huge lay down in terms of cost up front for purchasing or developing a warehouse, and then the racking and all the machinery and the forklifts and the overhead and the labor. So we wanted to get away from that as a bootstrap startup in our early days. Okay, so keep the cost low. And then how can we keep the scale potential high? We said, well, what our strengths are and what we think we can do better than anyone else. My partner, Tom, on the client side, lots of relationships, great at networking, great at sales. So we said, we can attract the clients better than the average person can. So that's obviously super important from a sales side and growing the business. And then on the other side of it, it was like my knowledge on the warehouse side and my partner, Bart, he's a COO and kind of he's the glue of the company, keeps everything together. So we said, well, we can actually go into warehouses and train them better and train them for Amazon better than anyone else can. And what I should point out is, especially 6 years ago, there was a strange gap or mismatch in the market. And here's what it looked like. You had great big 3PLs that have been around for 20 or 30 years, well funded, but what's going on inside of their facilities? They're doing mostly B2B. So, people selling electronics to Costco, and they're receiving those goods and sending them to, let's say, Costco. We have a client that does Costco, Best Buy, Walmart, Sam's Club. Great. So we have 3PLs that do that. But what they didn't know or weren't super well familiar with at the time was the Amazon FBA space. And so who was doing the FBA prep? Well, it tended to be what I call mom and pop sellers. And most of them had the exact same story. It was like, I started on Amazon. I had some success with my product. I opened up a warehouse. My friends asked me to do their prep, so on and so forth. And now they're running a 5 or 10,000 square foot warehouse doing FBA prep. And in most cases, doing it pretty well. What they were lacking is the sort of rigor around process and metrics and reporting and customer service that the 3PLs had. So there was like a perfect world where if you could put these two things together, you'd have a really solid, what I'll call like an enterprise level network of prep warehouses is what we've grown it to, where Amazon sellers can get their prep done with all of the metrics, integrations, analytics that you would need if you're an enterprise level company. And think not one person with 10 employees, but rather like a 20, 50, 100 person company. Even though aggregators is a bad word, we still work with some of the aggregators who are,
The shameful word of the industry nowadays.
oh yeah, you can't say the A word. You call anyone an A word. They say, no, we're a
Oh,
brand growth agency. Oh,
this
okay.
is a family friendly podcast, Taylor. Why are you bringing up the
Yeah.
aggregate?
Yeah. Sorry about
No, please continue. Please continue.
well, so that was our vision back then. And bring it back to the Airbnb analogy. What we said is, hey, look, like if I had to try and explain to my parents for the 30th time what I do, it's like this. I said, how if you go on Airbnb, you can search for a place to stay based on certain number of criteria. So location is obviously the most important, but are you looking
Mhm.
for yoga retreat in the jungle? Are you looking for a condo in a city, et cetera, et cetera? So you have all these filters that you can add, and you can search, transact, and get customer service on the platform. And so what we developed in our platform, Preptopia, is something very similar to that, but for e-commerce companies. And instead of having hosts and travelers, what we have are warehouses in our network and e-commerce companies. And I also want to point out that one of the most important things is we're not a broker or we're not strictly making that introduction. We actually run the relationship the entire time. So our largest team, for example, is our account management team. They do an awesome job. And what they do is they communicate with the clients at the e-commerce companies and the warehouses every single day. And so that's the Airbnb analogy has sort of worked like that, where we say, well, here's the why that we wanted to follow this model that exists. And then here's what it looks like when you translate it to e-commerce.
I think that's brilliant, man. And that whole cottage industry of like the sellers becoming their own 3PL people and then selling to, friends, family in the industry. I have seen that happen a lot, like as you might expect, right? Like we were the first broker to sell FBA business before Amazon even knew you could do that.
Yeah.
Like I still remember like Amazon telling us, no, you can't sell an FBA business. You can't sell accounts. Like, no, they can. Like you
Yeah.
literally cannot legally stop them. So it's like we became like Amazon's thorn in their side for a while doing this, but so now we're on good terms and everything. But yeah, that whole cottage industry, I could totally see the dinosaurs of the old school 3PL of just distribution warehouse basically to like Costco, as you mentioned, not catching up to the times and kind of like combining these two things together. Was that a hard experience to do that? I know we're going to get into logistics and stuff, but I think it's such an intriguing model. Was it difficult to pull that off?
It was really, really difficult in the beginning, and over time, it's gotten much easier. And so here's what we would often encounter. The easier scenario is when they say, we want to work with MyFBAPrep and we want to get into Amazon, but we don't know what we're doing. And so we say, okay, we're going to start from scratch. And you would then go in and you'd make very clear training, very clear rules, like hard and fast rules, like, here's a quiz. What's the size that the box can be? What's the maximum weight that any box can be if it's shipped in as a small parcel? To try and get people thinking in like Amazon compliant ways, right? That was actually easier than the next scenario, which is people who said, oh, yeah, or I should say warehouses that said, oh, yeah, we have Amazon clients and we want to work with you. Let's do it. We'd say, that's great. You have Amazon clients. And I remember one example where we had actually shipped a truckload of a client's inventory to Kansas City with a new warehouse we were working with. And the inventory landed and we said, okay, we've given you user permissions. You have the account. There's only a handful of SKUs. Go ahead and create the shipping plan. And they said, like, what's a shipping plan? And we're like, what do you mean? And so what we came to realize is that they were familiar with Amazon 1P, but not Amazon 3P. So when Amazon, just to make up an example, when Amazon sends them a purchase order for Clorox bleach, which Amazon is selling 1P, and they're the buyer on record and they're the seller on the platform, that's what they were doing. So they would just get a purchase order and say, oh, I need to go pick, 1,000 bottles of Clorox bleach, put them on pallets and get them into Amazon, which is considerably easier than having to know what you're doing and going through Seller Central, creating a shipment plan, understanding, is this going to be LTL or is it SPD? And how do I make sure and save the client money on the shipping? All of those intricacies and nuances of what we do on the FBA side were lost on them. And so it was incredibly difficult. We often had, a lot of pie on our face when delays would happen as a result of that. But what it allowed us to do is just get better at the process, right? Get better at
Yeah.
training. And like, this seems so silly to say out loud now looking back, but it's like, oh, we have a brilliant idea. We have to send our employees on site and receive the first shipment hand in hand with the warehouse. So our eyeballs are actually looking at it, or we're over their shoulder as they're creating a shipping plan. It's like, yeah, that's a great idea. One of the more simple ones. That's what we do is we show up on
Yeah.
site, and now it even goes earlier in the process. Our sales team is often meeting the clients at the warehouses, doing walkthroughs, meeting everyone who's going to be your daily point of contact on the MyFBAPrep account management side, that sort of thing. So we've just made it much more human, and surprise, surprise, that works a lot better.
Oh yeah, yeah. The whole pioneer phase. I feel like that's almost anyone that is starting a new business. If they persevere, like that's how it all starts, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I did not know this was an obvious glaring vers- like the 1P, 3P thing. You just don't know till you try, right? It's bound to happen. But yeah,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I want to ask you probably more questions. We'll get back to your business model and the software, but let's dive a little bit into here for my audience who are FBA sellers, and maybe they're not yet ready to sell their business. They're looking to squeeze a little bit more profit out, and so I think you have a lot of wisdom that can help them here on the logistics side of things. So, talk to me a bit about what are the common supply chain bottlenecks for Amazon sellers? Like, what are they facing today? Is it similar like in the height of COVID, or has it changed?
I think it's changed. I mean, in the height of COVID, it was mostly delays in getting your product from your manufacturer overseas into the US. And that was either long in terms of time or very expensive during COVID or both. I think we're recording this in June of 2024. The main issue that people are talking about are Amazon fees continuing to be increased and this time in like very much a punitive way. I mean, just people are feeling the difference in, I'll call it like just the new shipping costs into FBA. And I think at a high level, you can address that one specific Amazon increase, but the clients who are doing it well are just saying, okay, this is an opportunity to just get better at supply chain overall. And before I make this sound like there's some happy ending at the other side of it, I actually don't see it that way. I think the fees that Amazon are charging in comparison to what they used to be are like quite egregious. So there's that. But our largest clients are saying like, what can we do differently? And how can we save money throughout the process so that these fees don't affect us as much? I think that's sort of the direction that a lot of our conversations have gone, which is like, well, what would it look like to save money? So most of them, of course, are quite based. I think we all are looking for silver bullet or that like secret magic Harry Potter wand. Like, what are like the $100 million sellers doing? And it's like, okay, I'll tell you, but it's not what you think. Here's what they're doing. They're buying more inventory at once to keep their costs down. They're consolidating their freight forwarding companies overseas so that they have one vendor and they're spending more money with that one vendor, which is bringing the cost per, say, container down, et cetera, et cetera. It is quite basic stuff, but it's one of those things where you end up saying, well, in the beginning, you go, well, we can't do it. We can't bring all of our inventory into one facility, or we can't bring all of our inventory under one 3PL provider like MyFBAPrep. And there's a long list of reasons why that is in the beginning, right? Like, well, we use this 3PL because it's close to our manufacturer in the US, but we use that 3PL because we bring in this product from Asia. Okay, great. But if you just look at those reasons why that can't work as hurdles or obstacles, what you can get to if you fast forward through some consideration, a lot of Zoom calls with supply chain people, is like, actually, most of these things can happen. And what the largest businesses in e-commerce and on Amazon are doing that the small and medium ones aren't, is finding cost savings before you ever get to the Amazon platform. So supply chain, I think, is a big way to do that. And just like high level with MyFBAPrep, what we do is, we have clients who are using multiple nodes in our network. Let's just say they're bringing stuff into the Port of Long Beach. So they use one of our 9 facilities in the 1.5-hour radius of the Port of Long Beach in California. But then they also have a manufacturer in the Midwest. And so they use a warehouse outside of Chicago that handles that. And then, they want to do some fulfillment for their website, which is not a huge part of their catalog, but they're trying to grow with their email list. And they keep that in a warehouse in New Jersey. If you actually use MyFBAPrep for all 3 of those things, you will get a cost savings on per line item, per unit thing, because you are now a bigger customer. You're basically, instead of having 3 individual warehouses that are not connected, you have 3 warehouses in the same MyFBAPrep network, and we can acknowledge that and give you discounts based on the volume. That's just a high level way we can save people money.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I thought your business model was so much more clever than my friends who started like their own little 3PL, because it's so flexible, right? Like if someone buys, I don't know, like buys a 7-figure FBA business from me, right? And that person likely does have multiple disparate 3PL vendors, and that buyer can instantly see a profit margin increase by just heading over to you, right? Like you've solved this problem basically, which I think is brilliant. The flexibility there is, I think, very appealing. So I agree with you. Before I move on to the next question, I want to kind of stick on Amazon fees a little bit. So I haven't had a chance to really talk about these Amazon fees on my podcast. I know it's quite a grim story out there with a lot of FBA entrepreneurs, feeling the pain of it. But maybe for my audience, I'm sure but the FBA people in my audience already know, but my other e-commerce people, maybe they aren't familiar. Talk to me about what's going on with the Amazon fees.
So Amazon has raised inventory placement fees. And so it's hard to speak across tens of thousands of Amazon accounts accurately. But basically what we are seeing is massive, massive increases in the price to do the same work. Like at a high level, that's what it is. And so I've read some great studies by Scott Needham, Larry Lubarsky, Derek Demuth. These are three names that come to mind. And let's say people have sold over $100 million in their Amazon career, so they know what they're doing. And I've seen them really do some testing around how bad are these fees? And if you choose not to opt into them, what will happen? And the results are not good. It feels like Amazon has programmed into the algorithm, if you do not do the inventory placement in the way that would incur the high fee, then they will send your inventory farther away, which is, you're actually paying on the front end instead of sending it to, say, a fulfillment center close to you. And then Amazon does the FC transfer on their own, which is sort of what I would call like the legacy way of doing things. And I was reading one study that Scott Needham published, which was like, when you declined inventory placement in the Southeast, from a warehouse in the Southeast, it was getting sent to the West Coast, even though those ASINs had inventory in the West Coast. And so it's almost like, I would go almost as far as saying this is true. But it feels like Amazon has programmed the algorithm in such a way where you can either pay the high inventory placement fee or pay higher shipping costs to go farther away, when traditionally the algorithm has said, let's just get this inventory to the closest fulfillment center. And then there's a few things behind that, which are like, unless you need inventory on the other coast, et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, it looks like Amazon is viewing their sellers as a place for them to increase their profits by increasing these fees, which did not used to exist. Here's why that's bad. Number one, ultimately, those increased fees end up with increased prices on Amazon, and the buyers or everyone's customers end up paying more. Now, surprise, surprise, Amazon's now just double dipped. They're charging their sellers more, and their fees go up if you raise the price, and you say the percentage of what they take is the same, and now they're making more off the customer's order. So it feels really icky, these new fees. And I do want to say, I have not found the one and only solution that solves this. I don't know what it is. It's different for different companies, but at the end of the day, these fees are tough. They hurt and people feel them. And, the easiest thing to do is raise your prices so that the customer pays them. And unfortunately, I think we'll see more of that over the next year or two.
I think it's already happening with that. It's such a strange move by Amazon. Like I get why they're doing it, because, of course the company wants to make more money, but it's kind of a you're screwed either way scenario, because it's like, what are you going to do if you're 100% on Amazon and they release a new fee? Like, you're paying it. Like, there's no getting around it, right? 'Cause I often joke that my FBA friends have the same problem as my affiliate SEO friends, like too reliant on a single like tech giant,
Yep.
Google changes their algorithm, Amazon introduces new fees, like, you better live with it. You have no other choice. Are you seeing, because I actually have a couple friends that have, well, they did big FBA operations, but they had already built like a kind of a DTC arm of their brand. So they've been slowly siphoning off that traffic away from Amazon. Are you seeing your customers also kind of like branch off of Amazon more because of this?
I think the push for omnichannel is probably about 5 years old. Has this accelerated it? I think a lot of people, these forces are happening at the same time, but it's like Amazon fees continue to get higher, which makes everyone think like, what were to happen if? Like, one thing I'll give Amazon credit for is the crazy suspensions or the out of nowhere, my listings were pulled and I can't get them back live. That feels like it's gone down. I'm hearing less stories of that
Good.
from previous years. And I think all of our clients and all sellers would agree that like that's become more reasonable, where you don't have to lose sleep at night that you're going to wake up, your account's frozen, you can't get in and you can't get answers. I should, be fair and say that it feels like that has gotten better. I do think it continues to be a trend or a theme that e-commerce businesses are thinking omni-channel. And so, has the increased inbound placement fees caused more Amazon sellers to go D2C, for example, or go Walmart fulfillment services, or go to their own website? Maybe. They were probably already thinking about it. This is not like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's just
Yeah, it's
one
just
more
helping them
reason why
push.
they have to think about it. And I'll say the biggest thing that I'm seeing in the e-commerce communities right now, the biggest thing period is TikTok Shop. And TikTok is shaking things up in a very interesting way. I'll give some high level examples, which everyone I think would acknowledge anecdotally. So one of them is, well, how has TikTok affected Instagram and YouTube? And you see reels and shorts becoming more of a thing as opposed to the traditional way of interacting with Instagram and YouTube in this case. So it's like you can see they're following suit. But from an e-commerce standpoint, what you see is you have TikTok Shop launching, and it's the first non-game to gross more than $10 billion on mobile. And so that's important. That's significant. And I'll also say for any sellers who are getting on or already on or thinking about getting on TikTok Shop, we're seeing a halo effect from TikTok Shop, which is every one sale you make on TikTok Shop, you can assume 2 or 3 increased sales on Amazon. And why is that? So people are on TikTok mostly for entertainment's sake, but everyone still trusts Amazon in terms of customer service and in terms of fulfillment, which Amazon is awesome for in both of those things, especially if you're a customer. Maybe not so much as a seller, but especially as a customer. And so people will watch the affiliate video on TikTok and then they'll hop over to Amazon, type in that brand and say, oh, it's on Amazon. It's legitimate. And I know, if something doesn't go right with this order, then I'll have great customer service. I can get my money back. And so pushing it one step further, if people want actionable advice, you can actually fulfill your TikTok Shop orders from Amazon. You can do that.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought it was only like plugged in with Shopify. I had no idea
No,
you could do that.
you can do it. You can do it from FBA. And so if you're a seller and you say, well, another platform I have to manage, and how does that split my inventory? And I think the biggest consideration is like, well, does that mean I have to have now inventory in Amazon and at TikTok, or which TikTok doesn't, we're not there yet, but it's like, no, the answer is no. You can just use your FBA inventory to fulfill TikTok. There's an integration. It's easy and it's happening. So that's one more reason or one less hurdle you have to solve to get on TikTok as a seller. And then you get the halo effect. And likewise, to your point, you can do it through Shopify as well. If, like, let's say you're a brand that sells 90% on Amazon and 10% on your own website, and you're thinking about this new platform, TikTok. Great. Get on TikTok, and you can have the choice of fulfilling the TikTok sales orders from Amazon FBA or from whoever your 3PL is that's integrated with your Shopify store. So there you go. And that's worth experimenting with. And I'll say I have probably 5 or 6 friends who are so bullish on TikTok that they are actually paying their affiliates in the TikTok affiliate marketplace greater, like upwards of 50% of the sale. And you say, well, that's
Wow.
crazy. Would you do that? Because for people listening, that's not profitable. You're losing money on every sale.
Right.
Why would you do that? There's 2 reasons. Well, there's actually more. One reason is the halo effect I just mentioned. If you're paying 50% on one TikTok sale, but if that leads to 2 or 3 Amazon sales, now you're actually paying less than a traditional affiliate on, say, Instagram that would get all of the credit because the attribution isn't there if somebody falls off TikTok and orders on FBA. Right. So when you're looking at your real numbers, you realize that's actually affordable. Another reason is to get the best affiliates on TikTok, they can search in the platform and organize it or filter it, I should say, by percentage of payment. So what does everyone do is they put the highest first. And so you want to be at the top of that list, not in Amazon terms, not on page 10, right? So if you're giving 10, 15, 20%, you are falling in with everyone else. But if you want to make a bit of a gamble, you can pay 40, 50%, get more recognized by better and bigger creators, and then pay more for their sales, but also realize that 2 things, what I've already mentioned with the halo effect on Amazon, and then the other is if you sell something like a consumable, you are now able to, you win the customer and you pay more for them up front. But if you can resell to them at, say, a lot of people aim for a 30% repurchase rate in e-commerce. If you can get 30% of your customers to buy again from you because you're selling oats overnight or you're selling athletic greens or et cetera, well, then that's worth it to lose money or break even on the first sale in order to get the customer, and then lifetime value, you'll recover that and then some. So that's kind of what we're hearing the most as far as omnichannel. And we started talking about this from Amazon fees. Does that push people to omnichannel? Well, Yeah, especially because you have this new TikTok, let's say elephant in the room that people need to decide, am I going to invest in and try and do this, or am I going to stay out for now?
That's brilliant, man. I didn't realize TikTok Shop was having that much effect. I'm glad you brought up the halo effect, though. I feel like I'm one of the only marketing guys who talk about halo effects. I brought it up to another marketer guy. He's like, I've never heard anyone say that before. But this is why I always recommend, like, even DTC brands to have a presence on Amazon. Cause, like, say you're running a Facebook ad to sell shoes or whatever, right? They fall in love with the shoes. Maybe they even click, but for whatever reason, they don't buy. They're like, I was really interested in that. And they're like, where do they go? What's the number one search engine for products? It's Amazon, right? So then they
Yeah,
see your shoes on there, and it's because of your Facebook ad, but you won't see that in the tracking, right? But that's
exactly,
like part of the
exactly.
halo effect, right? That's all fascinating. I didn't realize TikTok Shop was going that extreme. I knew it was doing well, but 50% on a physical product, that is quite the confidence that this is going to give you
Oh
a
yeah.
return. So that's pretty interesting. Moving more into the supply chain stuff again, from my experience, a lot of my entrepreneurs that are in the FBA or e-commerce space, they kind of struggle with optimizing their supply chain. So, in your view, I mean, you've seen hundreds and hundreds of these things now at this point. What are the core pillars in your view to optimize your inventory?
Yeah. Well, I think the core pillars of like a really good e-commerce company from a supply chain side, it starts with like ordering and, being able to see your today inventory in real time and then ordering and forecasting, which, is like you can't get good at the other things without that. And so the first thing that comes to mind is I would say inventory management system. And two, that I know both the founders that help people streamline their logistics are So Stocked, and Chelsea Cohen's the co-founder that I've spoken to there. And a friend of mine, Nate Ginsburg from Sellerplex, they do the
Mm.
same thing. Different applications, and both of those companies are strong and worth checking out. But, inventory forecasting is something that, let's say, the aggregators are doing better than the up and coming, $2 to $5 million a year Amazon sellers. Because as everyone knows, the cost of going out of stock on Amazon is it's hard to exaggerate how much that hurts you, right? And it's like I've heard, I'm not going to be able to credit. I can't think of the person right now who said this, but it's like rule number one of Amazon: never go out of stock. Rule number two of Amazon: never go out of stock. Like rule number three, see rule 1 and 2, right? So staying in stock is super important. Another core pillar is, as we've discussed already, omnichannel. Most of our customers have Amazon as their primary platform. We are seeing a lot of, in like 2024, we're seeing a lot of direct to consumer brands who just aren't even on Amazon yet. And I'm always fascinated by people. It's like, how are you missing the Amazon boat? And then I've rephrased the question to, tell me why you're not on Amazon, because of course you've heard of it. And like, what do I not know that you know about the way you out? And that's often, much more interesting answer or story or what have you. And then lastly, I would say, look, having inventory in different warehouses or 3PLs throughout the country is a good thing. And you might say, well, wait a minute, you're talking about consolidation. Well, we encourage our clients consolidation to save money. What we encourage our clients to do is have a plan for getting inventory into your platforms quickly. Could be D2C, but mostly for us, Amazon, Walmart's becoming a thing, but still not big. And so what we offer to our clients is we say, hey, we do omni-channel fulfillment. If you need 80% of your inventory to Amazon, 10% for D2C, and 10% to, some other channel, like let's say it's for your influencers, we can do that in one building. If you want to split it and you say, well, our D2C operation is quite big, we'll get our clients into a warehouse that knows D2C inside and out. Let's say they want to do an integration with ShipStation. Great. We'll put enough inventory in that facility, and that will be your D2C warehouse or node. And then we'll put your Amazon inventory in another one, et cetera, and so on and so forth. And actually, the number one way that we do this is not, I'm talking about like platforms, website, and Amazon, but the number one way we do this is geographically, which Amazon platform are you selling on? So we have clients who sell with us or who prep with us in the US, Canada, Germany, and UK. So those 4 platforms. And so our account managers are managing with their supply chain teams where are the shipments originating from, where are they going to by country, and then which warehouses. So that sounds complex, but the nice thing is when you have one point of contact, if you just imagine a supply chain person's day on a brand side, rather than having Monday call with US, Tuesday with Canada, Wednesday with Germany, Thursday with UK, it's like, well, I'm going to speak to MyFBAPrep on Monday, see how we're doing. I'm going to check in on Wednesday and see what's happening. I'll call again on Friday and we'll, try and shore up any issues or delays that we're having. And there's some simplicity in that, but you're diversified enough where, where MyFBAPrep is able to help you in a pinch and get all the things you need done with many options for overflow capacity and shortages and, inventory ups and downs. We try and work really closely with our clients on that stuff.
Yeah, this is again why I think your business model is very clever, because you kind of have this very decentralized network, but a centralized point of contact that simplifies the complexity of that decentralization. So you get like all the benefits of the decentralization, where you can like go up and down or whatever, but you don't lose the benefit of like what you just said, one point of contact. Like I have customers all around the world myself, and let me tell you, my sleep is bad.
Yeah.
I'm talking to people in all sorts of different time zones all the time. Some of my friends are like, well, why don't you just move back to America? Like, no, man. Like sometimes I'm talking to a Vietnamese seller,
Yeah.
to a Thai seller. So it doesn't really matter where I'm at in that case. So I really like that. I like the answer. But you mentioned forecasting. I just had another FBA person. I think his episode is going to go live right before this. I asked him a very similar question. I'm curious in your thoughts, because this is another area I think a lot of like, not the aggregators, but more, I guess, mom and pop sellers struggle with, is that forecasting element. Like, how do they go about, especially if they're more new, like maybe they only have a couple months of data, but even people longer that's been around longer time, like what is a good methodology to go about forecasting? Like, what's your advice there?
Yeah. At a high level, I would say order more than you think you need in case something you're doing on the marketing side actually works, right? So I think here's what you shouldn't do as a new seller. I sold 10,000 units in this time period. It could be a month or it could be a quarter. And I'm making a distinction there because some people, if you're manufacturing in the US, you can order on roughly a month, ahead of time. If you're ordering for overseas, you need 3 months. But so let's just say a time period. So I'm going to sell 10% more from today's time period to next time period. Okay, great. That's the wrong way to do it. And you're just planning this linear growth. And what I would recommend much more is at least 60 days worth of inventory in whichever platform you're looking at, plus some sort of growth multiple, like 20 or 30%. The most fun stories I hear as an e-commerce seller are when people go viral. I mean, we've mentioned TikTok, and they have a crazy sales day as a result of, usually it's like an influencer or a video that the brand does. That's awesome from a sales side. What you don't want is that to put you out of stock and then, your BSR tanks, right? So I would say the nice thing about these algorithmic repricing or inventory management softwares is that they actually are able to like just update such in real time compared to a human looking at a spreadsheet and making forecasts that your numbers will likely be tighter. But what I just recommend across the board is order more than you think in case something goes well. Everyone's working with influencers. Everyone, even Amazon has noticed TikTok. And of course, now you have affiliates on the Amazon platform that you can work with and find right there, right? And so in case something goes well, you want to be able to fulfill those orders, capture those customers, make that money. And then, you can leave yourself. I don't think you can really send too much into Amazon except for like long-term storage fees. What typically is a limitation as an up and coming seller is like, how much money can you spend on that inventory? But as much as you can budget for that, go for it. Because if something goes well, you're going to want to make those sales and not be kicking yourself.
What you just described, well, I think all of that's great advice, by the way. I what you just described is a big reason why those entrepreneurs sell with me, because I have a buyer. He's bought probably like $2-3 million for me worth of e-commerce stores, right? And he's, I love all these FBA sellers. They're all young, making crazy money, and they're all completely broke. It's just like
Yeah.
it's constantly going back into the inventory. So a lot of FBA sellers come to me like, I'm ready to get off this hamster wheel, right? But yeah, I think that's great forecasting advice, to be honest. Probably the best I've heard on the podcast. Like everyone thinks linear, but then you get that influencer that pops off, and you're like, oh shit, like you're like
Yeah.
fly it in. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm with you on that. You mentioned some software for repricing. So that's a follow up I had for you, and I think I'm understanding what you're saying. But you're saying there's some software out there that can adjust your price dynamically to kind of like slow down that potential out of stock as people are buying more and more. Is that what you were saying there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've used Sellozo and Aura and a few others that don't come to mind right now. But yeah, on the repricing side, Sellozo, Aura, and then I mentioned on like the inventory forecasting, SoStock, Dollarplex. These are just great companies to type in and take a demo from. Go on YouTube, watch somebody using it, and watch somebody who doesn't work for the company giving their review of it and see what the best parts are. A lot of times you get large sellers who will actually do comparisons between 3 or 4 of them, and that can save you a lot of time when you're making your decision as to like which one you want to go to.
And it just like integrates with your Seller Central account. Is that how it works?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, and two, you can have ones that reprice every couple minutes. And every year they get more and more complex in like a mind-boggling way. So for example, some of them will take into account what the other sellers on your main keywords, what their stock levels are on Amazon. So like, hey, my competitor looks like they might go out of stock. They're very low on inventory. Maybe if we raise the price a little bit, we can make more margin. Or you have day pairing, which is, you know, people will spend more money for my product at 9 p.m. than they will at 9 a.m. So at 9 p.m., the price is a little bit higher, and at 9 a.m. it's lower. I mean, there's no end to variables that these algorithms take into account. And I'm certainly not an expert, which is why I just make the best I can do is which one am I choosing? And then I'm going to trust their setup, right? Or I'm going to trust their recommended
Faith in the
algorithm,
algorithm.
go with that. But yeah, it's one of the many, many complexities of selling on Amazon, which is just mind-boggling because some people, that's their competitive advantage. They're like, I'm just more in tune with pricing strategy. And you'd be surprised at how many percentage points you can drop to the bottom line just by having super dynamic pricing on Amazon.
Oh, for sure. For any of my buyers out there listening, if you're looking at buying an FBA business, in my experience, most of our sellers, like the smaller ones at least, aren't using that software. Like that's a fantastic way to increase your margin. I have another follow-up question on that actually.
Wait, I want to say something here. I
Yeah, yeah.
I was listening to your podcast with Roland Frazier, who is an absolute like G in the space, for lack of a business term. And one of the things he was saying that you guys were talking about, which was so interesting, was he was saying, well, a lot of times he buys and sells businesses for those who aren't familiar and go check out that episode. He was saying a lot of times if I'm buying a business from a founder, the founder and the business is their baby, they love it. They haven't raised the price in like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
And the point that he makes is every dollar you raise the price is equal to $1 drop to your bottom line. There is no other initiative you could undertake, period, that has a higher a closer to 1-to-1 ratio than raising the prices. And so, one of the things he said he looks at immediately after purchasing a company is like, when's the last time they raised the prices and what do the competitors charge? Are we competitive or comparable to that? And that was so interesting to me in your guys' chat of just like, this gets back to what I was saying earlier. It's like, what do the best people in the space do? And it's like some magic wand, crazy black hat stuff. I raise the prices after I buy a company. It makes me more money. It's like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just got excited and I felt like interrupting you. Sorry for that, but
No, no
I
worries. I do like so I've helped sell over 2,000 businesses at this point on our marketplace, right? And we made 80 millionaires at the moment of exit. And this is constantly the biggest problem I see that on the seller side is like they charge too little. Like entrepreneurs are infamous for charging too little. Like especially if you're doing services, it's really common in services like marketing agencies, but across the board, like I tell my e-commerce friends, I tell all my friends in business, like you should be testing your prices like once or twice a year. It's not like a one and done thing. I have a buddy, he bought a software. I bring it up, like I feel like I brought it up like the last 3 episodes, but maybe even on the rolling one. But he bought a SaaS business from me. Been around for like 20 years. The guy never raised his price in 20 years. He didn't even have the customers on subscription. Like so every month his customers had to come back, enter in the credit card again.
yeah.
Like, wow, this is crazy. What is going on? Like, that's not even user friendly to the customer. Like, they probably hate that. Yeah. But yeah, it's just like the most common thing. So these auto pricing tools, I think, is such a smart solution. My follow-up question to that, by the way, it was related to BSR. So let's say we raise our prices as our inventory is getting closer and closer to stocking out to try to bridge that time gap to restock.
Mhm.
Does that affect BSR at all? Because I would imagine, your volume's slowing down, right? Like, what's
Yeah,
the effect on BSR from that?
it can. I mean, there's too many variables for me to answer that question and with any sort of like intelligence because, it depends on, well, like if you're number two, it's going to affect your BSR way less than if you're on page two and it might drop you to the bottom of page two or the page three. So there's so many factors, it would be hard to say, but the idea of algorithmic repricing is that if you were doing a test, like raising your price, you can put boundaries on it, which is like, hey, if it, let's say you raise it 50%, everyone thinks that's a bad idea, right? I think it's a bad idea. Well, if you just flat out stop selling, the repricer will lower it again. So if you trust the algorithm, you're in a much better place to answering that question than asking someone like me.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, I love that idea. I have a buddy, he shared a friend's strategy. This was on a DDC store, and they did something much similar. I imagine they must have had a software like this, but they would also use scarcity. So they would have like in real time as the stock was getting lower, like we only have like 15 of these left as the price is jacked up. Like, oh shit, I better order now. So it was like using that whole situation to their advantage, which I thought was really interesting. Well, cool, man. We're coming up towards the end of the podcast, but I do want to ask you a question about Preptopia before we get into the rapid fire section. So, on the one end, you have my FBA prep, but you also have the software Preptopia. So, talk to me about this. Is this like a package deal for your customers, or is this like a separate kind of thing that you should check out?
Sure. Preptopia is included. Preptopia is the prep management software we use inside of our warehouses and for our sellers that we've developed. Now, the application for this is for Amazon FBA sellers. And so, what Preptopia allows you to do is have like a control tower view of where your inventory is, meaning across our warehouse network. And then for the warehouse, it helps them create the shipping plans inside of our software, which is passing back and forth via the API key information to Seller Central. So a warehouse creates a shipping plan in Preptopia and create that shipment, which will go into Amazon. The warehouse does not have to leave Preptopia to complete that shipment. So that's on the warehouse side. On the customer side, you get that control tower view. Where's my inventory across all of these warehouses? And then the best part about Preptopia from the beginning is we imagined a Domino's pizza tracker. So it's like when the client sends the PO into the warehouse, they can upload that PO, and now the warehouse knows the PO is coming. When the PO lands, it will go to the next stage, which is like landed. And then as the warehouse starts receiving that inventory, they'll open up a box and say, okay, this is a box of SKU 1, and there are 100 units, and they can receive truckloads full of inventory based on that methodology, which is like, think of it as counting up. Here's the PO. This is 100% of what should be on the shipment. Now the warehouse is going to receive it in the receiving stage, count up to what the PO should be. And then any discrepancies, any damages, anything will be documented into Preptopia. And then assuming the client wants all of that inventory prepped and shipped into Amazon, the warehouse can just go through and finish that shipping plan in Preptopia and get it in. And so one more time, this is free. It's included in any of our customers. They have the ability to use it free of charge, and our warehouses know how to use it. And it just gives a little bit more clarity on where your inventory is in the prep process. And then the last stage in the Domino's Pizza Tracker is ship to FBA. So once the warehouse is done and it's gone out the door, it will show as ship to FBA. And of course, the seller can track that on the Amazon side inside Seller Central.
I like it, man. So it's kind of like almost a mission control HQ of all your inventory data that you're seeing in real time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you said it only works with Amazon right now, so like it won't work on, say, other distribution channels, or
Yeah. So we have some sellers who use it for their D2C, which is just like, how much inventory do I have? But if we have a client like an aggregator, let's say, and they have, millions of dollars of inventory in our warehouses and they're selling on 5 platforms, we use something a little bit more robust on that side. So we'll use like extensive is probably the most common one, which is, yeah, it's just a super heavy warehouse management system and order management system with many, many, many more integrations. Like it'll integrate into their NetSuite for their accounting team and et cetera, et cetera. So for now, like from the beginning, when we were only Amazon FBA focused, we developed Preptopia for our Amazon client. Now, as we've grown to do D2C and B2B, we've kept Preptopia specific to Amazon because we want to actually get it right and do that thing well before saying like, okay, we're going to try and do everything, and it's worked a lot better for our clients because a lot of times they come in with a list of integrations they need. And so we say, well, this warehouse is familiar with this massive like 3PL management software. Let's use something like more tried and true for their needs.
That makes total sense. Yeah, I think that's also like just from a business building perspective. I think that's the right way to go. Try to be a jack of all trades, master of none. Like I think that's
Yeah.
usually the wrong advice. So narrowing down to really like FBA, and there's so much business still in the FBA world. So I think that's a smart move. Well, my friend, we're at the end of the podcast. So this is the section where we do the rapid fire questions where I ask you 3 quick questions. You give me 3 quick answers. Are you ready?
Sure. I'm nervous, but I'm ready.
No, don't worry, man. If you don't answer these questions well, we just won't publish the entire podcast. So no
Perfect.
pressure. What's perfect? Awesome. All right. Question number 1. In your view, what is the best hidden growth opportunities in e-commerce right now?
TikTok shop.
Based on our earlier conversation, I agree. I
Yeah.
agree wholeheartedly. What resources can people go to help them streamline their logistics or learn how to do a better job?
The best is MyFBAPrep. And adding to that, you could look at the algorithmic repricers or the inventory management softwares we discussed earlier.
Awesome. I am glad you answered with your own business. I had a guy on the podcast the other day, and he also answered his own business, and then he got really like ashamed that I said that. He's like, "Oh no, I didn't mean to like self promo." Like, no, I literally put that question in there for you to self. Like, no one uses.
What?
I had a friend. He had a friend. He named like his competitor on my podcast. Like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah, you're like,
Uh,
we gotta recoup that. Yeah.
yeah. All right. My final question and the hardest question on this list. What has been your funniest moment since you started working in e-commerce?
Ooh, yeah. I'm trying to come up with one that I'm allowed to say, but is also funny. Okay. So we had a client in one of our California warehouses who was, let's just say, trying something new. And they were selling those like propane heaters that you would have at a table in an outdoor restaurant, right? Like or on the balcony, porch, patio, whatever. So, you fit the propane tank in, which is like the same size as the one for your grill. And then it's like 5 to 7 feet tall and it just heats the surrounding area. This company experienced, we don't know, they fell off the map, but we assume they experienced something bad in their business. And they left 2 truckloads of these outdoor heaters in our warehouse for almost a year. And the problem is you would say, oh, just give them to your employees or just donate them. But our lawyers recommended like, hey, that's the worst thing you could do because you don't want a customer to come back and file a lawsuit for you, destroying or selling your inventory. That's like the worst badge you could have on your reputation. And it's kind of like a cardinal sin of being in warehousing, which is to walk out of a warehouse with inventory in your hand, period. But so we were having calls like once a week. What do we do with these propane heaters from, 2 truckloads full of them from a client who doesn't want to pick them up, won't pick up our calls, won't pay for them. And the warehouse is saying like, at some point, guys, I got to charge you for these. So we didn't want to incur any costs to store them there, but we also didn't want to get rid of them either. So yeah, that was one that sticks out where it's one of those like looking back, I can laugh at it, but in the time I was tired of thinking about propane heaters. And the other thing is it was in a California warehouse. People in California are less likely to care about those heaters. So
Right.
yeah,
What ended up happening? What did you end up doing with them?
I'm not going to say online.
My lawyer has advised me to terminate this podcast.
Yeah. I'll tell you when we stop recording.
Brilliant, brilliant. I could see all sorts of like funny stories like that. I used to work at FedEx, which, adjacent to this type of stuff a
Yeah.
little bit. Like I still like I knew a guy, he walked out in his FedEx. This is up in Alaska where I'm from. And it was middle of winter and he was wearing this big purple FedEx coat and it was all super fluffy and rectangular for some reason. because he had like 100 iPods with
Yeah.
him. I'm like, dude, how did you think you were going to get past this metal detector? Like, this has got to be the dumbest heist I have ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So if, for someone who wants to reach out to Preptopia or MyFBAPrep, or maybe to reach out to you personally to ask you some questions, Taylor, what is the best place for them to come and find you?
Sure. You can go to myfbaprep.com. My email is taylor@myfbaprep.com. Or if you want to speak to someone from our sales team, tom@myfbaprep.com. And we will gladly have a call, have a meeting. And, we like to geek out on this stuff. So even if you just want some information, reach out to us and, we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was always a good time, Greg. Thanks.
There you have it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it got you inspired at all the different things that are happening in this industry. And of course, if you just want to buy a highly profitable business, you can always go to empireflippers.com/marketplace, or maybe you want to make an exit of your highly profitable business, and you could go to empireflippers.com/sell your site. I've been your host, Greg. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review, give us a like, a follow, share it across social media. Talk to you all soon. See you on the next episode.